The east coast of the United States would be directly in the path of this deadly onslaught. To many people, the idea of a tsunami on the East Coast, triggered by a landslide 3,000 miles away, may seem unbelievable. But these killer waves could be on their way. Using Ward and Day's computer models and state-of-the-art CGI animation, we'll take you down to the shore as a massive volcano-triggered tsunami comes roaring up on land, tearing buildings from foundations and leaving a wake of death and destruction from Maine to Miami. It would probably begin like this. The Cumbre Vieja volcano in the Canary Islands would start to rumble ominously and then erupt. Based on previous experience, some scientists believe that shortly after the first eruption, earthquakes will begin to shake the island. The 3-mile crack along the western ridge will suddenly widen like a zipper along 10 miles of the western face of the mountain. If this section of the mountain were to slide into the sea, a megatsunami would start to move across the Atlantic Ocean in every direction. Meanwhile, scientists would furiously analyze data in hopes of determining if and when the volcano will suffer a catastrophic collapse, like the Ritter Island collapse and tsunami in 1888. It is a horrifying possibility, but a real one. And the stakes are high. Emergency management experts and government officials around the rim of the Atlantic Ocean frantically consider whether or not to start evacuating. Tens of millions of people in towns and cities line the shores from Europe to North Africa and North and South America.
The problem for the emergency managers is then, do they start evacuating at that point when the landslide hasn't happened yet, but there's a possibility that it may do, but they may not?
While emergency personnel along the east coast of the United States scramble to get prepared, across the ocean, the mountain continues to ominously shift and crack.
And of course, once it starts moving, it gets weaker, the rocks are broken up, there's less resistance to further movement. So, provided the pressure of the water is maintained, that's the point at which it can go off and produce one of these giant landslides.
The western face of the mountain drops 20 feet toward the water below. Then, suddenly, a massive wall of rock 10 miles long and 1,000 feet thick, approximately half the size of Manhattan, slides into the ocean. The 200 cubic miles of rock sends up a wave over 1,000 feet high around the island. It is the beginning of a worldwide catastrophe. First to be hit by the giant waves are the surrounding Canary Islands. The waves spread out in every direction. A wall of seawater more than 300 feet high hits the west coast of Africa, destroying such landmarks as the famed Mosque of Hassan II in Casablanca and killing thousands. Out in the open waters of the Atlantic, the waves heading in the opposite direction speed across the ocean at the same rate as a jet plane.
These energy waves can transmit quite nicely in this medium. Even though it seems like it's very, very far away, they travel pretty much intact.
The wave grows by about 3 or 4 times, again, just like waves at the beach. And so the 10-meter wave in the middle of the ocean will grow back to about 30 meters when it comes ashore.
Some scientists feel that this computer model in which a collapse of Cumbre Vieja on La Palma generates 30 to 100-foot waves almost 3,000 miles away is inaccurate. But other experts feel strongly that recent research at Ritter Island and other locations have confirmed these megatsunamis are possible. At 9 hours, the first of 20 90-foot waves obliterates mid-Atlantic islands like Bermuda. Caribbean islands such as the Bahamas are completely overrun. 10 hours after the landslide, the killer waves simultaneously attack cities and towns all along the East Coast.
Well, there would be a wall of water that would probably hit the East Coast anywhere from Newfoundland all the way to Florida to Miami.
The first wave will start to near the shoreline up and down the coast.
When the tsunami wave gets into shallow water, two things happen. So here's one wave crest, moving along, slowing down as it comes into shallow water. The next wave crest is coming along behind. It's moving faster because it's still in deeper water. So the wave crests get closer and closer together.
With more waves starting to approach the eastern seaboard of the United States, emergency services scramble to prepare for the worst. But they are quickly overwhelmed.
When you look at tsunamis and you look at all the disasters that happen, we tend to do a scale of what is the frequency and likelihood of occurrence and what are their impacts. And there's a point at which you kind of run out of resources to do everything at the same level.
Sirens are blaring in every coastal town. Residents try to make last-minute provisions for escape.
If you look down, you see all these people on the water's edge. A small tsunami, it may only mean that they have to get off the beach and get to higher ground to save their lives. But in bigger tsunamis, where the ocean meets the Florida coast, you could be talking 40, 50, 100-foot tsunami. In that case, not only do you have to get off the beaches, you're going to have to get high up in the buildings. And you look and you see in the background, you see these buildings. Many of these buildings may be the only refuge. People will have to get up in them and get up quickly if a tsunami hits the Florida coast.
The cities and towns on the east coast of the United States hunker down for what could be one of the deadliest natural disasters in history. It's a frightening prospect, but it could happen tomorrow. An eruption of the Cumbre Vieja volcano in the Canary Islands triggers a massive landslide and starts a MegaTsunami. Giant waves rush west across the cold Atlantic waters. After traveling 9 hours, the waves near the eastern coast of the United States. The megawaves crash into the Outer Banks, a string of barrier islands off the coast of North Carolina. After this first assault, the swells finally make it to the mainland.
It's not just one wave. Again, it's not like the Hollywood movie where it goes splash and over. It's a long sequence of waves. In fact, the biggest tsunami may not be the first. It may be the second or third.
The rising water hits Boston Harbor and other parts of the mainland almost simultaneously. In New York City, waves crash into the financial district in Lower Manhattan, sending a lethal flood of debris miles inland.
Saw what the debris looked like in Indonesia with that tsunami. You get all the mud and all the trash that's in there and literally sweeping people up. You're in a soup of lethal projectiles, mud, and fast-moving water.
Further south, resort towns and coastal cities all along the mid-Atlantic states drown under massive seawater surges. The water is relentless.
It's going to be 2 feet, then 5 feet, then 7 feet, then 12 feet, then 40 feet over a half an hour. And then that's going to drain back out over another half an hour and basically repeat itself a dozen times.
What the tsunami doesn't get in the first set of waves, it will rip apart in the next.
First wave's going to come in, and then the sea's going to go out, and the next wave is going to come in 10 minutes later, and the next wave's going to come in 10 minutes after that. And of course, if one has maybe 20 large waves, the whole thing might last 3 or 4 or 5 hours quite easily.
If that type of tsunami is possible, you're dealing with a catastrophic event that would probably even exceed some of the most powerful hurricanes due to the water damage along the coast. In the state of Florida, close to 8.5 million people are in a threat zone.
In Miami-Dade County, an urban area of 2.3 million and growing, the vulnerable and low-lying areas east of I-95 are sitting ducks for the huge waves.
And all of that water pushed in is going to flood well beyond the beaches.
90-foot waves invade the beach areas. Smaller deco hotels along the beach disappear under the waves, along with the few thrill seekers still at the beach.
When you have water going 20 miles an hour, that exerts a force of about 3,000 pounds on you if it hits you. Anybody who's ever walked across a stream knows that. You lose your footing because all the pressure of the water pushes you sideways.
Imagine a river in flood coming towards you. That's what a tsunami is like, rather than the sort of plunging breaker that you'll see a surfer riding that curls over and breaks and doesn't come inland.
In Miami, emergency management officials struggle to get people west of I-95 as water starts to flood across the flat lowlands around Miami-Dade County.
Basically, it's between US 1 and I-95, the interstate system, that is the highest point along the coast. And generally, if you can get beyond that point, you're generally outside of the worst part of storm surge areas.
After 4 or 5 hours, the worst waves have finally subsided, but it's not over yet.
But you got to survive the event. That's the first step. Then the second part of what we generally talk about with your disaster supplies is surviving the aftermath. But what's going to happen after the tsunami will be equally critical for the survivors, because much of what they depend on a day-to-day basis may be destroyed or not functioning for days to weeks to even months.
Government organizations like FEMA may be unable to cope with a disaster that strikes more than 1,000 miles of coastline. Infrastructure will take years to return to normal.
This is one of those events that would put the United States in a position that we have never found ourselves in, and that is being dependent upon other nations to assist us in our time of need.
If this mega disaster ever hits, it will impact the east coast of the United States for years and will have worldwide repercussions.
That's going to affect long-term the entire face of the eastern seaboard and our economy. In effect, those areas that are not in that strike zone, the Midwest, the West Coast, will be managing and supporting the East Coast for years as that rebuilding takes place.
But with recent increased awareness, there is some room to be optimistic that the nation can survive a catastrophic event such as this. A tsunami warning system already exists in the Pacific. A recent bill in Congress includes funds to install 6 additional sensors in the Atlantic in case of an East Coast tsunami.
I would like to think that those thousands of people that died in Asia didn't die in vain. And I think that we now know that it's really important to have a good warning system in place. And it can't just be a basin-wide system like we had in the Pacific, but it has to be a global system, you know, for the Atlantic, for the Indian, as well as the Pacific Oceans.
Volcanic landslide tsunamis may not be as common as hurricanes, tornadoes, or earthquakes. The last major tsunami to be caused by a landslide occurred in 1888 at Ritter Island. But when they do occur, they can alter the face of the Earth in ways that mankind has only imagined. The threat is real, and the death and destruction will be catastrophic.